One of the biggest things for me is about creating pathways, providing opportunities. So as a professor at the ANU, I'm going to say to all of you right now, if you ever want to come to university, come to the ANU, because we will look after you. And there's pathways that we've already got in place to help the best and brightest kids from across Australia with the best potential. If you want to come and try university, even just come and have a look at campus, please, you can contact me through Fiona. That's my offer to all of you, of all ages. You don't have to just be young people to go to university. You can be of all ages. My mum did law as a mature student with 3 kids under 10. So, let's see. Have we got some slide action going on, chaps? Am I failing here? Here we go. Tech. Tech works until you put a human in with it. There we go. Right. So virtual worlds and women's wisdom. And so one of the things I'd like to do before I start is I'd like to just give you a message of welcome from your robot overlords. If you didn't realize it, the robot overlords would like to welcome you to the 5th Industrial Revolution. We keep talking about Industry 4.0, how everything's connected, the Internet of Things, all the sensors that we have in the cameras that are watching us, the sensors on our phones, the CCTV in the street, the microphones you might use when you're doing teleconferencing. All of these things are totally connected, and that has finished. And it's really good that that stage of the Industrial Revolution is done, because that was all about the tech and not about the people. Whereas Industry 5.0 is something Fiona and I geek out on quite a lot. It's this idea that you take all of that technology and you make it work. You take that tech and you make it work for the turtles up on the west part of Cape York there that haven't had a successful turtle rookery for over 40 years because of the feral pigs. You take it and you make it work in terms of personalized medicine. How do we use drones to get food and medicines to people? How do we get drones to airlift people out? How do we have autonomous hovercraft going up and down the rivers? How do we have shark detection and croc detection drones? How do we have fire management augmented with augmented reality and different ways in which we're going to be using technology to fight fires and share knowledge when we come across different kinds of emergency situations like cyclones? So I want to give you this today because not everyone's working on this. It's my gift to you. 4.0 is done. 5.0 is here. 5.0 is all about technology working for society. And this is incredibly important when we think about things like the voice. And I am an absolute resounding yes for the voice, because I have 2 little boys that I've just relocated from Brisbane to Sydney, and one of the things I want them to know is that their mum did everything she could in her power to give them a better Australia than she was actually entered into as a citizen a few years ago. And if we don't have recognition of our first people in Australia, we're the only country pretty much to not recognise that. And it's a point when I talk to Canadians and the POMs about what could actually be improved in Australia, the technology around sharing stories, sharing knowledge. This is what we need Industry 5.0 for. Imagine that there's someone that's never been to country before. And they're like, well, we don't know, I've never met an Indigenous person, why would I care, why do they want this voice? This is where Industry 5.0 comes in. I would say, well, come and sit in this virtual reality headset, and my friend Fiona is going to take you onto land, excuse me, and she's going to show you where she was brought up. She's going to take you up onto the Torres Strait and show you where her dad was brought up, and you're going to listen to the stories of the people and why this means no one wants to be turning up and begging for something that is sovereignly theirs. And I think as privileged white people, we can't relate. So how can we use technology to help create bridges and help people relate? So we'll continue that conversation. And after we've had a successful yes in the referendum, we'll continue that conversation. Okay, so I've got a spare mic there, which is always good. Now the next thing, biopiracy. Has everyone heard of this expression, biopiracy? So we talk about, let's look at these great technologies. Let's look at how we map everything. We can map everything to a centimetre resolution. Let's show everyone where our natural resources are. Let's take everyone to our sacred sites. And then you get people that visit your country, and they'll take lots of photographs, and they'll put them on social media, and they will tag them and take samples. People will come and take samples without asking for permission. And so what we know already is the Kakadu plum is registered in the United States as a pharmacosmeceutical. And the people that actually grew that and technically own that genetic stock no longer own the genetics to the Kakadu plum. So when the whole ideas boom came out around the time that Fiona and I met in 2015, there was this whole rush on innovation of let's encourage lots of regional Australians to start creating products from their natural flora and capabilities. But what we didn't provide them with was protection. So you don't own the genetics if someone else registers the genetics. It's a big issue. So if you're working with or working on projects that are directly related to the plants and the animals where you live, you need to talk to an IP lawyer very, very quickly, because you need to register and protect your genetics. And it's something we don't have built in, and it's something I've been trying to have a go at the federal government for years now. But whenever I talk about it, that Kakadu plum story reminds me of my year in industry when I did my degree in environmental science at university. I went to Thailand to try and find a new banana species. Right? Bananas, as we know, are orchids. Bananas, as we know, the ones that we eat, are triploid, which is why banana fruit splits into 3. And they don't have the big seeds in because they're infertile, because they're the edible bananas that we eat. But the stock that they come from is increasingly shrinking in terms of its genetic diversity. And when you're looking at banana stock disease resistant, you need new genetic stock all the time to go into your bananas. When I was living in Thailand, of all the species of rice they have in Thailand, I think they've got 9 different types of jasmine rice. 7 of those are genetically owned by American corporations. Can we not do this? Open all of us up in Australia to our natural flora and fauna genetic stock, and then have other sovereign countries register the ownership of it? Are we not past this yet? And so when we take this now and start throwing it into a virtual world space, I could technically, completely legally, come up to Cape York, find a sacred site, maybe women's business. I could scan that thing with a laser scanner. You wouldn't even know I was there. I would take that back and I could sit that in a game, in a computer game. I could sit that in some kind of virtual world. I wouldn't have to acknowledge you. I wouldn't have to pay you. I wouldn't have to pay respects to you. I could just come and take it. And so when we think about the ways in which biopiracy has already affected people like those that were working with the Kakadu plum, imagine now what people want to do with your natural resources and how you actually can beat them to it. How you can actually register those things, how you can actually protect those things. So, next slide. And I did straighten my hair this morning, but I'm just saying I've got Cairns hair. Every time that camera goes on me, I'm like, I've got Cairns hair. I like my Cairns hair. Okay, so the next thing is digital twins. Has everyone heard of a digital twin? You all have a digital doppelganger of you. You all have a digital copy. Does anyone here wear a wearable device like an Apple Watch or a smartwatch? Oh, you are priming those tech billionaires with so much information about you. And what happens is whenever we create digital twins of ourselves, we do it from everything we click. We do it from everything we look at. Every camera that picks us up creates a little digital footprint. Something Andy Penn, the former CEO of Telstra, said the other day was, every single crime in Australia has a digital footprint. We now know that our phones have an accuracy to 5 centimeters. Now, you may be struggling with your 3G signal, but I can guarantee you someone knows where you are, even if you can't send a text message. When I climbed Kilimanjaro in 2012, I had better phone signal halfway up Kilimanjaro than I had in central West Queensland. And when we think about this idea of a digital twin, it can be really empowering. Personalized medicine, personalized choices, personalizing how we're going to live, work, and play, opportunities for us to find things that the algorithms think we might like. But who writes the algorithms? Are they someone that look like you? Are they someone that look like you? Is it someone that looks like me? Who is it that's creating these pieces of software that are collecting these pieces of information about you and then selling them? So here's something that will give you some thoughts, maybe at 11 o'clock tonight. When you pass on from this mortal coil, your digital twin will not. It will keep working for someone else forever. And what happens is they amalgamate you and sell you, and amalgamate you and sell you, and amalgamate you and sell you. Anyone bothered by any of this yet? We have sleptwalked into a surveillance capitalism society whereby we happily flick through videos on Instagram, we happily make TikTok videos, we happily give all of this information away to sovereign. You see, that machine didn't like me saying it, did it? Didn't I can see you, coffee machine. We constantly give away pieces of our information. But if I came up to you in the street and I went, hi, with my clipboard, so what did you have for breakfast this morning and how are you feeling? And did you like Miley Cyrus's new song? Do you think it's about Jennifer Lawrence? And I'd also like to know, would you buy the red pill or the blue pill? Or would you like the black shoes or the red shoes? Would you willingly give a stranger, I mean, I'm obviously great, you'd give me that information, wouldn't you? But why is it that we give all this information out completely free of charge? If I was Prime Minister for a day tomorrow, the one thing I would immediately do is ban, sorry for all the people in the room that are quite young, I would immediately ban all social media for under 18s. Gone. Now, the thing is, social media, when it first came out, does everyone remember when Twitter first came out? It was really good fun. I remember finding scientists on Twitter, connecting with celebrities on Twitter. If you had a celebrity like one of your tweets, the original Siri, she followed me on Twitter. I was beside myself. Siri's following me. She's a real person. Or is she? And, you know, it was great. You could interact. There was geology Twitter, academic Twitter, space Twitter, soil Twitter, any kind of Twitter you wanted. You could put a call out to the ether and you'd get the information back. Twitter, when it first came out, not under current ownership, it was very much a proto-metaverse. It was a place where we all had our own profiles on equal footing with everybody else in this virtual world. It was our entry point to finding information pieces, connecting with people, and finding friends in ways you hadn't really been able to do before. It was actually quite special, and I'm quite sad to see how it started heading south, to be frank. I never knew the word troll when I first signed up to Twitter. It was something that was completely, I'd never heard of the expression before. It was something from fairy tales in Europe when I was a kid. It was never talked about digitally. So the thing about kids' mental health, social media, and some of the issues that Jordan was talking about is this perpetuation of filtering and this perpetuation of short, dopamine-led, highs that then leave your brain drained and you can't cope with the lows. The mental health issues of social media are not going away, and it appears that no one cares to do anything about it anymore, but I'm going to put a bet on now. Within 6 months, TikTok will be banned in Australia. By the end of the year, TikTok will be banned because the Americans are going to ban it, and if the Americans ban it, I suggest we'll be pretty fast afterwards. Okay, so there's your digital twins. Everyone feeling good? Feeling good about yourselves? Let's take this to a good place. Okay, so let's stop looking at my Cairns hair. Let's look at the next slide, please, chaps. Okay, the idea of the humanitarian metaverse. So, I'm working with DFAT. We put together a working group at the ANU in cybernetics, the School of Cybernetics. And one of the things we were looking at is, when you take all of these technologies, you create your digital twins, what do you want to do with them? So one example is the Kingdom of Tuvalu in the Pacific. They are going to be flooded out in about 20 to 30 years. Sea level rise will mean that Tuvalu is gone. It will not exist anymore. It won't be sustainable. They won't be able to feed themselves. They will be climate change refugees. The diaspora in Australia will probably absorb that nation. And that in itself is a tragedy that we predicted in the 90s, and as environmental scientists, it's quite an anxiety-filled career, it has to be said. Because everything we predicted in the 90s has pretty much come true, but that doesn't make us feel good at all, because we predicted all of this stuff going wrong, and it has. So the idea now that we're going to have worse cyclones than we've ever had. Everyone been through a Cat 5? Yeah, pretty much. Now imagine you're going to get a Cat 5 3 or 4 times a year, right? Imagine, what are your houses going to look like? What are your roads going to look like? What are your power capabilities going to look like? Are you going to have micro-generation? Are you going to have community batteries? Are you going to have green hydrogen? Are you going to have green methanol? Are you going to have sustainable fuel coming from green hydrogen and green methanol? You're going to be growing fruits and veggies inside shipping containers, using aquaponics, hydroponics, people breaking glasses. Are you going to be living in a world that looks like it looks right now? We don't know. So the idea of the humanitarian metaverse is, I will take all this information of, let's say Cairns, and we'll look at where the sewage works are, where the electrical substations are, where the hospitals are, where the roads are, where the critical infrastructure is, the water pumps, the water treatment works, the safe houses that are Cat 5 rated, the ones that aren't Cat 5 rated, and I will simulate cyclone. Cyclone 1, this gets taken out, that gets taken out, this is available. Okay, we know we have to move that from there, those food stores from there, and people need to shelter here. Cat 2, well, Cat 5 cyclone number 2, we have to move this to here, this is out, this is out. So by the time the real one happens, it's like when we do fire drills. We've practiced it enough, so we know there's a Cat 5 coming, a raccoon. We know that this Cat 5 is modeled based on exemplar 3127B. And we think that this is going to be out, this is going to be out, and this is your best shelter. And we've practiced this. This is where we need you to move. These are your food stores. This is where your water store is going to be safe. Now imagine that we can then plan better, mitigation-wise, around how cyclones are going to be hitting Cape York and how it's going to be affecting your recovery. The next thing is, okay, the roads are out for 6 months, you can't get food deliveries, and then you get a cyclone. Oh, then we've got foot and mouth disease, we've got a pandemic, and the hospital systems are taken out by the cyclone. We can plan this. Then we go, okay, the roads are out, the power is out, the community's isolated, the helicopters are dealing with an oil spill, there's a bushfire somewhere else that someone's dealing with, we've got another pandemic happening there, we've got another pandemic happening there, and we've got some boats coming in over there. These ideas that, these things are only happening in silos and linearly. And I was talking yesterday to the EPA in Victoria, and just imagine this scenario. You're in a tunnel in Melbourne, and in that tunnel in Melbourne, you've got an electric vehicle with a massive LiPo battery on it, a lithium battery in it, which when lithium batteries burn, they burn through concrete. They burn for about 20 frickin' hours. And when they were all getting flooded out down south, one of the things that first started happening was fires from the LiPo batteries in the Teslas, because no one realized you flood a car with an EV, it will explode. Who'd have thought? Literally flood and fire. Thank you, Elon Musk. And so then the next stage is, right, so you've got the EV, then you've got a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle with hydrogen in it. Then you've got a diesel truck. Then you've got a regular car, then you've got a hybrid car, and they all crash together. And I said to them, have you modeled this? And they just sort of looked at me and went, no. And I was like, this could happen right now. There could be, in one of your tunnels in Melbourne, a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, an EV, a hybrid, a diesel, and a regular car right now about to have an accident. We have no excuse anymore not to plan these things. Scenario planning in a deep, immersive, gamified experience is incredibly powerful. Okay, let's see what my next slide is. Conservation credits. So when we look at how we're going to be managing land and how we're going to get paid to manage land, things are changing. People are now starting to recognize that we need to actually, and I think there's no one in the room here that needs to even hear this, the link between human health and planetary health are inextricably linked. Environmental health and public health are directly correlated. You've got kids suffering from mental health in the cities because they don't see trees anymore. The actinomycetes in the soil, whenever I go out to Laura, out to Western Ulangi, there's something about the air. Just before I got pregnant with my first child, I was out in West Queensland with fresh air in the soil, pregnant the next week. And there's something about it. My husband had nothing to do with it. It was literally a virgins in the force. But there's already proven to be chemicals that these soil actinomycetes, which are a kind of microbe that looks like a bacteria and a fungus had a party, that they actually produce these wonderful volatile organic compounds that actually confer positive mental health. We know the Japanese have a term for it. They call it forest bathing. So when you look at your natural resources up here in the Cape, you need to be paid not only to maintain, but you need to be paid to protect and grow these resources. We know that 80% of the world's wild places that still remain wild are under the control of First Nations people. And those people should be the richest people on this planet because they are holding the lungs of this planet in their hands. And I remember when everyone panicked about the Amazon being on fire, but when I explained to them, you do realize the phytoplankton in the oceans actually provides more oxygen than the Amazon, and the phytoplankton is disappearing, and the Amazon is burning, and if the phytoplankton is in trouble, so are we. And the phytoplankton is managed by things like whales and dolphins and turtles and sharks and those large marine fauna that move things. We call it the whale pump, that move nutrients from places to stir up and create these phytoplankton blooms. As an environmental scientist, this to me is nothing new. This is complete logical. So one of the ways we could fight climate change, and I have been talking to the X Prize about this, is we need to suddenly have a humpback whale breeding program. Or what we need to do is create robot sperm whales or robot blue whales or robot humpback whales that can go and do that while we breed them up. Because if we basically had, and it's in my book, you're probably laughing at me, Fiona, because you remember, so it's in my book that if we had whales, just large whales, at a pre-whaling level, we wouldn't have climate change. They were sequestering so much carbon. So, conservation credits becomes carbon farming. And I'm nearly over this part of the conversation and we can get into some questions. But we already have farmers here in Queensland who are being paid to sink carbon into their soils, be it through non-till practices, be it through biochar, be it through various different mechanisms. We know there is knowledge. The politicians might say, oh, it's First Nations knowledge, it's Indigenous knowledge, it's First Nations science, it's Indigenous science. I say, it's knowledge, it's science. And I celebrate it as First Nations knowledge, but other people use that term to go, oh, it's First Nations knowledge. And I don't like it when they do that, because the best systems engineer is Mother Nature. And the people that speak the best Mother Nature language for me are First Nations and Indigenous people working and managing country. And so we need more people getting involved in carbon farming and less people involved in beef export. Let's just put it this way. If the Chinese regulate manufactured beef, lab-based beef or lab-based chicken, there will be no beef exports out of Australia anymore. And that's likely to happen within the next 10 years. So, my final point is there's this woman here who's a performance artist. And if you're not familiar, she's actually pretty cool, incredibly, I'd be quite scared to be in the same room as her. She's just so powerful to me. You know, there's some people that have this energy where you think, you've met God or you've done something where you see the world in a way that I could never do it. And can we just get that picture up again? Because I want to explain what that picture is, please. Thanks, Maestro. So this is her in augmented reality. So this is her virtual reality copy. So this is Marina Abramovich, and she had this really important piece of performance art, which I believe was in New York, and she sat there for basically 12 hours a day, and anybody in the museum could literally come and sit. It was literally her, a table, and another chair, and she just sat there all day, waiting for someone to come and sit in the chair opposite her, and she would look them in the eye for as long as they could take it. So can you imagine? I'm just going to pick on someone. Hi. Oh, she's silent. Are you feeling good right now? Are you feeling, yeah, there's a connection. It's good. So back to that picture, please, Maestro. So one of the things about this is she said, This is from a mixed reality project. Can we get that image back up again, please? Thank you. So this is from a mixed reality project. So mixed reality is a bit like Pokemon Go on your phone or when you're using glasses that are augmented reality. So you can see the world around you as it is, and you put your phone up and you can see your Pokemon. But when you came to the art gallery, you saw Marina Abramovich on a black rug on the floor, and she would look at you, and you would talk. It was a 15-minute performance piece. And she says, and this is why there's something about the way artists tell stories that we need more of, not less of, as we move to a more technically enabled society. You never actually see yourself in real life. Did you know that? When you look in a mirror, you're seeing a reflection. When you have a photograph taken, it's through a lens. I'm going to ask you just a final time, can we just have that image up again, please, because I need to explain it. So this is her in augmented reality. And when she first looked at herself in augmented reality through the lenses, through the HoloLens or whatever she was using, she said, it was a horror show. It was the first time she'd ever really seen herself, that she could walk around herself. How many times do we see the backs of our heads? How many times do we see ourselves from all of these different angles? We are quick to judge that reflection we see in the mirror, but it's just a reflection. It's not really how we look. And so one of the things I loved about this art was that it challenged this construct of who are we if we can now see ourselves in a different way through a virtual world, or being picked on by the cameraman, whoever that was. And the thing about this is, and this is where you can all hazard a guess, how many Australian dollars do you think that piece of performance art sold for? And now for all of the women in the room that are getting into art, listen to this number. How much do you think that sold for in Australian dollars? Oh, I wish. You're the second person that suggested that. I wish it was a few million. It was 560,000 Australian dollars. So it was still a truck ton of money for a 15-minute virtual reality immersive experience. But we're getting there, into the millions. So Ariana Grande, when she did her Fortnite concerts, so in Fortnite, this software game that kids go and play various things in, they've started doing music partnerships. The first one was Justin Bieber, the second one was Travis Scott, and the third one was Ariana Grande. And everyone talks about the Justin Bieber and the Travis Scott one, but no one talks about Ariana, and you'll like this number. So Ariana held a concert over 7 days in this virtual world, and she had 78 million people come through her virtual concerts. There is power in communication about who you are as an artist in a virtual world. That's more than the MCG can handle, right? The MCG is what, 100,000 or something like that? Is that the largest thing in Australia? Anyway, so I want to just leave you with this idea that we are nowhere near capability in terms of what these technologies can do for us as society and what these technologies can do for us as artists and creatives and women. And the big difficulty is, unless we start asking better questions now, unless we start learning how to write code and get involved in the games industry and involved in the virtual worlds, it's going to happen without us. And we will only ever be consumers, we will never be creators. And that, for me, would be a huge loss of talent and a huge loss of capability. So hopefully I've given you a few things to think about today. And hopefully you'll sleep very well tonight as your digital twin is working away for the tech billionaires in Colorado for you. And I think we've got time for a couple of questions. There's some roving mics. Rose has got one. There's a spare roving mic up here as well, because I didn't need it in the end. We've got one over there.
Question. It's right there.
Hello. Tell us your name.
Hello, my name is Tanisha Saunders and I am from Gorneville, and I have one question. What can my generation do to help avoid these disasters and to protect our culture?
Great question. There's lots of different things that you can do as an individual, but there's more that I think we can do as a collective. And so getting educated around what these technologies are actually going to mean, learn about what the law and the political policies are around how these things are, Talk to your local MP, talk to your local business leaders, express what your concerns are, talk to your local teachers and say, what kind of qualifications can I do? Think about studying at university, think about an apprenticeship in a tech company, have a think about where you want to learn and grow your broad horizons so that you can then be a voice around that table when decisions are made or someone is speaking the words that you have asked them to ask around that table. This is not the time to sit back and let this happen. We're very much at a tipping point. And my other point would be is get off TikTok. Because you're just giving the CCP lots of information about you. Thank you. That's a great question. Perfectly asked. Thank you. Got another one down here, and then we've got the lady there.
Thanks. Doctor, thank you for that. It's very insightful. My name's Shane.
Hi, Shane. Ooh. Can we kill that?
Colonisation is something that's affected probably the great majority of people in this room, and there's never really been a period in our history where we've openly put our arms out saying, come and colonise me. Instead, what has generally happened is we've had a resistance, and it's often the industrial revolutions which become the tipping point, whether from the first industrial revolution around moving from an agrarian landscape to an urbanised economy and displacement, or the third industrial revolution around the steam engine and sort of steam trains moving, and a lot of our frontier contact massacre sites occurred in that area. You've just talked about 4.0, done and dusted, stop talking about 4, we're in the 5. My genuine, honest question to you is it too late? Are we now dealing with our action of resistance, or is there still an opportunity for us to activate and be part of this 5.0 in a meaningful, contributive way?
Very good question. Yes, there is still time as we shift over, because there's a big thing in acronyms that the business world loves to talk about at the moment that I'm sure you've heard of, called ESG. Oh yeah, let's all get into the ESG. ESG business models, enviro-social governance models. Everyone always picks on the ESG with the big E, like climate change. Let's talk about the E, environmental protection, biodiversity loss, habitat loss, climate change, social, yeah. Governance, let's talk about, legislation and regulation. The S gets lost. And there's a lot of us that are now picking up actually that the S is actually the key maker to ESG. Because if you can get the social aspects right around business models, the E and the G naturally follow. So I don't know why it's been seen as almost like an orphan part of the acronym. So when you're working on business models, or you're looking at where you might invest or where you might want to work, or the projects that you might want to look at, using the ESG framework is something the stock exchange is talking about quite heavily. They're publishing all of this data in their annual reports. One thing I might suggest to you, actually, is if you do have a bit of spare cash, is to buy shares in some of the big companies, not too many, just like, $50 or $100 or something, because then you can turn up to their AGMs. If you've got a share, a single share in any company on the Australian Stock Exchange, you can turn up to their AGM and you can ask them, what are you doing about social license? What are you doing about protecting the youth? What are you doing about climate change? I loved it when they all turned up to the Adani AGM. I loved it. And so this idea that we actually do have power within ourselves to actually take part in the systems that we have to call the systems. The systems do have to change to a certain extent, but that's like steering a warship through the Suez Canal. It's too tight and it's too difficult to turn a ship around. Remember when that one got stuck? You don't try and turn boats around in the Suez Canal. You see how they blamed a woman for that? Do you remember? She was actually on holiday at the time, and they said that she was captaining the boat, and she wasn't even there. She was on holiday, tweeting, going, I'm on holiday in the Maldives, and they're blaming me for this boat getting stuck. So look, in all seriousness, there are mechanisms at play here around what people have to report on the stock exchange. And actually, I was very heartened when Katie Gallagher mentioned that any company now that hires 100 or more people have to produce their pay. They have to tell everyone what the pay gap is. When I left my consulting job, I was on about a 40% pay gap. I got made redundant 9 days after winning Queensland Businesswoman of the Year. Talk about tall poppy syndrome. So you've got to take the punches. And that's the other thing, I suppose, my other call to action would be is when you see young women succeeding, we don't tear them down. We protect them and we lift them up. Tall poppy syndrome is a curse on the cultures of parts of Australia that we really just need to get rid of. But yes, the boat has not left the harbour yet. We can still get on and have our opinion made and vote with your feet and choose more wisely and think about all the apps you've got on your phone and why do you flick through them and why do you give Zuckerberg all that time? Time is money. Why do you give all these people your time for free? They're making money off you. If you've downloaded an app and you didn't pay for it, you are the product. You're the one that's paying for it literally with your life every time you swipe through stuff. We just need more intentionality with how we use technology. One?
Just a question, Doctor. Where can we get your book? Oh, and also the sperm whale. Have you actually done an IP on it, and so that Zuckerberg don't actually, or not the Facebook creator, but the Tesla doesn't actually blow up the ocean with the diesel mechanical sperm whale as well?
That modelling needs to happen, hey. Sperm whales, it's really interesting. The North Atlantic, which I know is the opposite side to the world to us, the North Atlantic current that keeps Northern Europe green rather than frozen, it should be like Canada basically, but it's green like Central America because we've got like this belt of warm water that goes up the North Atlantic current. That's actually completely controlled by sperm whales. They've worked out that sperm whales going up and coming down, doing the mixing, it's called a whale pump. And so what they're finding now is that pump's slowing down, and they're going, oh, crumbs. So we think we've got problems here in Australia with our extreme weather events. The UK is about to turn into the Arctic, effectively. So think about their food security issues, think about their coastal erosion issues, because their entire weather systems are based on planet Earth is Gaia theory. It's Jim Lovelock's Gaia theory, right? It's a living, breathing, homeostatic entity, this planet. We're in balance, and when we're out of balance, it will rebalance us.